Once Upon a Morning Walk by Will Lutwick is a true story about almost dying on a volcano in Indonesia in 1980. The story is read here by Zac Jaffee.
The volcano was peaceful again. The other side of the rim across from where I stood was jagged against the royal blue morning sky. Minutes earlier, the scene was shrouded by the white, poisonous smoke plumes shooting up from the crater, and I had scurried to get out of their path. Now it was peaceful and clear. The only smoke in view was rising from Lesser Dome, miles away from where I stood on Mount Bromo. The only sound was the steady growling from the pit below, a sound like a busy highway on a rainy night. But there were no cars, no highway, no rain, only me and the volcano. "Make nice," I whispered to the crater, and I thought I heard it belch in response. "Sleep, sweet monster," I implored as I considered my hike around the rim. It seemed the day should be ending, but it was not yet mid-morning. No wonder. I had arisen that day at 2:30 a.m. to make this journey. After 6 months of grassroots travel through Asia, I had trained myself to awaken at odd times without an alarm clock, something I could never do for a 9-to-5 routine in the States. I kicked off the blanket at the anointed hour and quickly assembled myself. Timing was important. I wanted to reach the top of the volcano in time for sunrise, and I would need 3 hours for the hike from Indonesia, the little Javanese village, to my destination. Flashlight in hand, I squeezed out through the tiny bedroom door, being careful not to awaken the family that lived in the little cottage, all 6 of them sleeping soundly in the main room of the dwelling. Reaching the cobbled stones of the uphill trail, I put away my flashlight for good. I wouldn't need it. A full moon, unfiltered by the thin air, blazed brightly in a black sky. A coincidence occurred to me. I had last watched a full moon at the same time of morning, en route to a mountain's peak, then also to see a sunrise. The only difference between the scenes was about 4,000 miles and 28 days. Was I beginning a cycle of moonstruck pilgrimages that I would repeat on mountains all over the world, every full moon, until my death or evolution into a werewolf? I was delighted with my lunacy. Ahead of me on the trail, I found 3 fellow sunrise aficionados. 2 German women and a small man invited me to join them. The man was carrying an umbrella, although there was clearly no sign of rain. This irritated me, as it seemed a curious waste of energy. Peter told me his story as we walked toward our goal. He had been born in colonial Indonesia in 1940 to a Dutch father and a native mother. When Sukarno led the revolution in 1949 and threw the Dutch government out, his revenge was not complete. He banished from the islands all people with any Dutch blood in them. We moved to Holland, where I grew up, and I am here now on a teaching project. I'm a visiting professor at Yogyakarta, but I am as much of a tourist as you are when it comes to this volcano. The 4 of us reached the base of Mount Bromo an hour before sunrise. It emerged in the moonlight almost unnaturally perpendicular from the flat, sandy plain to a height of 1,000 feet above us. It would have been impossible to climb, not only because of its steepness, but because its slopes were covered by volcanic sand, occasionally interrupted by an outgrowth of brittle rock. There were, however, steps constructed to make the climb feasible. I scampered up them, leaving my fellow adventurers behind. I reached the top, then traversed the rim for a better vantage point for the 6 a.m. show. The sky was beginning to lighten to the east, and the moon was setting to the west. An emerald star twinkled brightly and directly above the center of the ever-increasing sunlight. Venus, the sun, and the moon were on a direct line with each other, a line that cut right through me. The universe and I were in perfect alignment. Rays of orange and yellow shot out from the sun, still hidden behind a craggy black mountain range in the distance. Colors streaked across the inverted indigo bowl above me. Then the sun itself inched its way to center stage. The orange light unveiled an amazing landscape surrounding me. The black desert plain from which Mount Bromo arose was actually a crater inside a gigantic, long-dormant volcano, and smaller volcanoes dotted the lunar-like landscape all around. The only sign of anything Earth-like was the group of 3 hikers watching the same site about a 10-minute walk behind me. We waved to each other as if to acknowledge the oneness and privilege of our common experience. After a picnic breakfast and Bromo's early morning smoke show, it was time for my walk around the circular rim. The path was comfortably wide from where I stood, and I looked across the vast crater a couple of miles to the other side. The rim seemed to rise gently as I would walk it for a short distance, but for the most part it seemed quite flat. I turned my gaze back and down towards the village I had walked from and saw far away on the desert plain moving white specks. Apparently my co-travelers had chosen a tighter schedule than I. I wanted to relish and explore this fascinating scene, and I was pleased that it was going to be me going one-on-one with this live volcano. As I started my walk on the clockwise path, footprints of many travelers left in the sand reassured me that I was not foolishly breaking new ground. The first mile was flat and simple, occasional configurations of those brittle volcanic boulders to walk around, the only break in an otherwise monotonous path. The sun beamed down from a clear sky, and I shed a layer of clothing. The path got narrower and started its rise upward. I thought to myself, well, if this was really dangerous, my trusty guidebook would have warned me not to walk around the rim. Besides, I needed a little challenge to pick up the tempo of the day. One cannot peak at sunrise and go through the rest of the day without feeling let down. I wanted to stay high. The trail continued to narrow to the point where it seemed I was doing a balancing act, walking a tightrope around a live volcano. To my right, a churning inferno. On my left, an almost vertical drop of 1,000 feet to the valley floor. And the rope I was on was still going uphill. From the other side, the precipitous incline had seemed like a brief and gradual rise. Again, I reassured myself that all was under control. It has to level off and widen at any moment now. Otherwise, they would have put signs along the path. Of course they would. One would think that 6 months in Asia would have taught me to discard my Western logic system, but there I was, slipping back into it for comforting reassurance. I continued, waiting for signs of an easier path, but instead the rim narrowed to a nearly razor-sharp edge. As it did, I had to move my body closer to the ground. It had become impossible to walk upright. First, I found myself on my hands and knees. Then, the only way to make it along was to crawl on my stomach. Naturally, even I would have turned back at this point. However, in addition to it being dangerous to just turn around, I had the added problem of gravity. As I had been going uphill, gravity was somewhat stabilizing. Going downward, it could turn the slightest miscalculation into a fatal mistake. My mind clung madly to the idea that the rim must soon change back to its earlier format, yet my rises and my near-to-the-ground eye level prohibited me from seeing my way more than a few feet ahead. I slithered along, trying not to look down, but succumbing to a morbid curiosity. The crater's bottom was a myriad of pastel colors and the texture of chalk. Its exterior seemed solid and still, but the ever-present soundtrack, like a busy wet highway, made me wonder whether a fall to my right would land me in a pool of bubbling hot lava. Not that it mattered. I would be near dead by the time I would hit bottom anyway. Inch by inch, I made my way, trying to put all my concentration on my movements, keeping my mind away from the absolute panic that was flooding my consciousness. Keep calm. Go slow, but go steadily. In a few minutes, you'll be laughing about all this. And then I came upon it. A mound of volcanic rocks welded together by a recent lava flow. As I approached it, I grabbed its nearest protrusion. I squeezed it, and what was brittle rock turned to sand and dust underneath the pressure. I looked up and saw it towering over my prone body. It was only 5 feet high. In any other setting, at any other time, I would have hardly noticed this unassuming rock pile. But there and then, with nobody around for miles and perhaps days, with my life hanging on a thread, it had become the ultimate obstacle. It stood there with my death certificate in its hand, saying, "Sign here, your time's up!" No! Not me! Not yet! Grasping for any remaining sanity, I decided it would be better to attempt going around the mound rather than over it. I grabbed again at some outer rocks. This time they held together. I carefully rotated my body clockwise, then downward, clinging to whatever I could. I dug my shoes into the soft sand, holding on to the mound even as its spiny surface cut into my palms. I was hanging almost vertically on the outside slope of the mountain as I shifted to my left around the rock mound. Suddenly, the substance in my hands evaporated into dust. I lost my footing and tumbled about 12 feet. Somehow, my left hand instinctively found some solid rock to grasp. A solid bank of volcanic rock jutted out from the smooth mountain face. My feet again dug into the slope. My fall had been broken. My entire being was tuned into survival. I looked above to the precious rim, so near yet so far. There was no way I could get enough footing to get back up there. And then I realized that even my present adhesion was quickly loosening. I felt my feet treading sand just to keep hanging on the precipice. My strength was almost spent. A bizarre calm swept over me, a soothing wave of relief. I looked down to my final resting place and calculated my options. Try to roll, then cling to some rocks. Then roll, cling, roll. Maybe it won't get completely out of control as I plummet down the slope. Perhaps I would hit bottom with many broken bones, but still alive. Then what? The area where I would land was a narrow isthmus between Bromo and an only slightly smaller volcano. It was unlikely in this barren lunar scape that I would be found for weeks. In a few seconds, I knew I would run out of any strength to tread the sand. My bloodied hands could not hold me up. I was as good as dead. I felt sad and angry. And then every emotion I had ever felt in my life rushed through me in an inexplicable experience occurring outside of the dimension of time. I am going to let go now. "Hello, my friend. Do you need some help?" The voice comes to me in a dream. It's a laughing voice. A voice I've heard before. Death isn't so bad after all. But I don't even remember the pain of having my body crushed and torn on its final ride down the hill. I open my eyes and I find myself in the physical world, still clinging, still treading, still alive. "My friend, why are you hanging on to this wall here? You could get hurt." The voice continues laughing. I look up to the rim. And there he is, lying on his stomach as I had done a few moments and an eternity ago. He is facing the omnipotent evil mound of rocks, which have been my final undoing. It's Peter, the little Dutch Indonesian professor. I cannot believe he is here. I thought I had seen him leave hours ago, but it must have been only the German women in the distance. I wanted to ask him what the hell he is doing here at my deathbed, and then I realized that such chatter is best to be left for later, or the hereafter, whichever comes first. My hopes for survival, fanned by his presence, dissolve in a horrifying instant. Although there are but a few feet between us, we cannot possibly reach each other. Oh, God, let's just get this over with! And then I see it. It's that idiotic, ordinary black umbrella that he carried with him on this clear morning. It is coming toward me, and as I make a final stretch of my arm to reach it, I hallucinate on the Sistine Chapel ceiling, where God is touching Adam's extended hand, breathing life into his body. I can just grab the end of it, and with that I feel my treading going upward as one rises to the surface of a swimming pool with the same movements. In a few seconds I am back on the rim, relieved and shaking like a leaf. "Peter, you saved my goddamn life!" The words tumble out of what is left of me. "Yes, my friend, that is true. It is also untrue, for you see, we still have to get out of this mess that you crazy American, have gotten us into." Me? Gotten us into it? I got me into it. How did I get you into it? I lack the strength to express my incredulity. "Well, I follow you around the crater. I think this American. He has the guidebooks, he has the maps, he must know what he's doing." So even this half-Eastern fool has succumbed to Western logic. And lucky for me that he did. I abdicate my leadership role to Peter. He decides that this time we're to go over the infamous rock mound. I'm happy to let him go first. My stomach sinks as I face up to this seemingly impossible feat. If I was ludicrous to try it before, it is more absurd now. I have the shakes so bad, I am worried I might touch off a volcanic earthquake. I am tempted to give up and start rolling down to my final reward. But Peter is gung-ho, and he slithers forward, umbrella in hand, and I don't want to be left behind. He makes it across, but he's half my size. Surely the mound will collapse under my weight. But before I can change my mind, I'm spread eagle on top of the mound, and then I'm on the other side. I am ready to shout for joy. Then I see that the rim is still a razor's edge to slither along, and it's impossible to tell how long it will be this way. I slide along, inhaling dust in my own sweat. My eyes are riveted on my savior's shoes just ahead, but then I see it from the corner of my right eye. White clouds of poisonous smoke are rising from the bowels of Mount Bromo, at first vertically, but now a gentle wind is shifting them our way. I can't stand it any longer. Give me a fucking break! I yell at the top of my lungs. The wind immediately shifts, and the smoke travels vertically once more, safely out of our range. Maybe I should have tried the assertive approach sooner. I watch the soles of Peter's shoes as we move along, and soon it happens at last. He shifts from a stomach to hands and knees crawl, the rim widens, and we're walking like humans once again. In a few moments, the path widens, and it looks as if it had never been, could never be any other way. We have completed our morning trek around the rim of Mount Bromo. We have come full circle. We are even still alive. "So, Peter, how do we top that one?" I ask him. "Well, I was thinking of walking back to the village and spending the rest of the day bloody drunk." "Now, really, Peter," I cautioned him. "It's much too early in the day for that. I mean, there's still time for a swim with the crocodiles in the river. Or how about a rousing game of Russian roulette?" Peter threw his hands in the air. "Next time," he said, "I don't bring the umbrella."